Hello, everyone. Welcome. Oh, sorry, my internet's doing something. Welcome to the first part of our webinar series on the wings of resilience. I'm Tash. I'm the CEO and founder here at Drought Angels. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today on this wonderful webinar, and thank our sponsors, who are the Australian Government, the Future Drought Fund, and the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation. Today, we're really excited to bring Kirk Reynoldson to you to tell you his story of resilience and all the challenges he's had throughout his life. But I'd like to introduce you to Lou McGregor, who is going to be our MC for today, and she's from Finding Yellow. So take it away, Lou.
Thank you, Tash, and welcome everyone to our first webinar series, which is so important. And the reason why we're doing this, and we've got to do a massive shout out to Drought Angels, is because for the last few years, I think everyone across the globe has been going through really tough times, probably much more than we've ever experienced before. And I think sometimes we can be a little bit blasé about this, or we just don't know what to do. So that's why we've curated this series, and we're bringing on three amazing speakers who have had such a depth of experience across a whole wide array of challenges in their lives, and I seem to be able to collect some tools to talk about how we can get through this. And what's so important today, and we're talking to you all around Australia from all different industries, sitting at home, having a cup of teas, hopefully they're on the farm, is that we've really got to take a moment to stop and think about our agri-industry and the impacts that they've had over the last several 7 years with flood, fire, drought, pandemics, a mice plague, and the list goes on. And, you know, these people get told they're resilient a lot, but really, where's the boundary, and how much can they take, and what can we do as a community to help these people and really make a difference in their lives. So today we've got a very special guest who you're going to absolutely love this. He's a former NRL player. He's a wonderful father to 3 young children, and he's also the founder of a fairly new now tech platform. So I would love everyone to welcome today Kirk Reynoldson. Good morning.
Hey.
Afternoon now.
How you going?
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really pumped to be on this webinar. As you said before, Drought Angels has affected a lot of people that I know in the rural community, and myself personally, I've had mates who have reached out to me and said that the only thing that saved them was Drought Angels. So this is very special to me, and I'm so honoured to be on here.
And we're so excited to have you because you have such a depth of history across such a spectrum of things. And today what I'd really like to talk about is your journey from, I guess, your own experiences from the farm, then you're the footy guy, then you're a father, and you're a tech founder. So, when we've had our own private chats, the tools that you've picked up along the way that have able to carry you to be able to manage all of these such different aspects of your life. So we want to hear your story. We want to hear the tools that you've got to share, and we want to walk away at 1 o'clock hoping that at least one person has something from what you've got to say to make a difference in their life. So Kurt, tell me first about, growing up on a farm. What was that like for you, and what experiences did you have?
Yeah, as a kid, Lou, it was one of the greatest upbringings ever. I think anyone that's been brought up in the bush will attest to that. I know that the parents, and as we'll get into the story, your parents can go through a lot of strain and financial hardship, and we've all heard the stories. But as a kid, I think you're kind of sheltered from that at the start. And as a farm boy growing up, and I guess a key takeaway that you're thinking about at the end of the webinar for people to walk away with is failure. Growing up on the farm. I was born in Jandowie, near Dalby, if anyone doesn't know where that is, and I was brought up in Wundowan, a little rural community out in southwest Queensland. My parents were in cattle and grain, and we bought at the peak rainfall early in the 80s. Interest rates were 20%. So, and then unfortunately it didn't rain after we bought the property. So, typical story. Mum and dad struggled for cash. I did a lot of work on the farm as a young boy, probably more work than what I should have done. been exposed to a lot of other things, but from an early age, it set me up with failure and knockbacks. I think that was that. There's no easy way to confront that stuff, and I was lucky enough to be brought into that at an early age.
So how did you, let's go back here, you're 7 years old, you're working on a farm day to day, and as you said, you've got that innocence around all of this and that sort of lifestyle that is portrayed to be quite idealistic. But when was the point that you realized that it wasn't all smooth sailing? And how did you, as a child, what did that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Lou. And I think that probably the stresses of the financial side of things, we lost the farms, and
how old were you when that happened?
Sorry?
How old were you when that happened?
We lost the farms. I would have been probably about 10 years of age. So the stresses in home, I guess that's probably the reality of where kids experience, this pain and trauma within, between mum and dad, and that was no different for us. It permeated throughout our lives, and we ended up moving into town. And I guess it's adjusting, it's readjusting, it's change, it's getting used to a new way of life. That's when it kind of sort of hit home, and I got to witness, especially around Dad. Dad was a born cowboy, and watching someone so passionate about nature and having that all taken away from him, and how that affects people. And I sort of I started to notice that, and I could see that what failure can do, or what perceived failure and what hardships can do to people, especially, if you're not, assessing it, if you're not addressing it. And I guess, getting into sports early, being a young athlete, I kind of sort of witnessed that as well, being able to be reflective as a young person and just sort of see what's happening around you and understanding what's happening from the pain and the trauma.
And Kurt, one thing you said then that I think, as I guess city people, we take it for granted about what it's like growing up on a farm. And you said something then about, for your dad, his love of the nature and his love of that lifestyle, because I guess when we became more aware of the struggles of our farming industry many, many years ago, an easy I guess brush up comment as well, why don't they leave the farm? But when you understand farmers, it's in their blood. And so do you think that was it from your father? It's not just as easy as to, let's just sell it and move to the city and go get a job in an office environment.
Yeah, 100%, Lou. And I need to bring my mum in there as well. She come from a proud family of peanut farmers from Kingaroy, and she loves the land and still got a few acres down the bottom of Flagstone Creek in Toowoomba. But you're exactly right. It's a way of life. It's who you are. The best thing I remember Dad telling me that this is my church. With nature, it's your way of life. It's your home. It's something you just can't pack up and leave and go throw yourself at something else. So that was definitely the case for us.
And then so the lessons that you learn on the farm, and I guess having to grow up at a very young age, watching, your parents lose everything, and you said subsequently getting divorced through that. Do you think that did that help you in your sporting journey, having that you've already had to form, I guess, a shield of resilience to some capacity?
Yeah, and I guess, everyone has different definitions for this, Lou, right? But for me, it's failure and adversity. And there's no, as I mentioned before, I don't think there is really an easier way to approach this head on than to face it, And I think as farm kids especially, and coming from, losing the farm and going to town, changing environments, I was very lucky because I was faced with adversity and hardship and failure early on. I got to witness.
You say you're lucky. You say you're lucky.
I know. I know. I guess my mindset around failure and adversity is a lot different, and I think you'll find when you talk to people, especially professional athletes, and we'll get into the conversation. And I'm in a position right now, and I'm jumping ahead, to hire people with our company and fire people, unfortunately, but it is a real adversity and failure to be able to look those things in the eye, be reflective, and come out of it, when you look back in time, they're very special things to happen to people. Like I've rubbed shoulders with a lot of country kids that have been through this situation, a lot of parents, that have coming through. To be in an environment now, to actually, especially comparing it to the city, to be in an environment of adversity and failure is a very, very unique thing. And that is something special you've got to hang on to and really be reflective on it and move forward, like take the good stuff out of it and look at it as a good thing.
Do you think that's because if you face something like that at a younger age, there's I guess, an internal thing where you've gone, oh, I've gone through this. I've gone through that. I've been through that. I can go through the next.
Yeah, 100%. I just think it's a function of observations, right? Like, not to be too scientific about it, but the more you face adversity, the more that you create the skills or the coping mechanisms to get through that, right? And I know I've worked a lot with psychologists and therapists before, and I'm not one. But I know that the more you get to experience that, I guess it's an act of survival, right? So you learn how to apply those lessons in whatever you're going to next. You learn certain types of skills that you can apply to next. It doesn't matter what endeavor you do. And as a kid, learning that early on, that was paramount. I would never have achieved anything in my life to where I'm at now. I'm the tender age of 43. I know I look about 63, Lou, but I'm only 43.
Going at least 10 years younger.
yeah. But I owe everything in my life to those initial years. To mum and dad. I know people look at it differently and might think I'm a bit of a weirdo talking like that, but everything that I was subjected to made who I am, and it prepared me to make it in these low probability success environments, and these really high stressful, high performance environments.
So let's talk about that, and let's talk about sport. And we've got this beautiful photo.
Oh,
look at that. Woo!
Look at that. I wish someone showed Katie that picture before she walked down the aisle to marry me.
So how old were you there? Who were you playing for? And tell us about, your career in professional sport.
Yeah, I guess, mate. Have we got 2 hours, Lou?
Let's keep it to a few minutes.
I guess for me, making it in the NRL was one of the greatest. It was one, again. I'm so privileged and so lucky to have made it. And playing in the NRL was great, but my journey to make it in the NRL, that was the gold nugget for me. And I sit back now and I can sit back and have a quiet beer and think about it. I talk to my mates and webinars like this, having a chat around it. Like, it was a really unique thing because I sort of, as a young country boy from 4 years of age, I watched mum and dad throw stubbies at the TV during State of Origin, and all I ever wanted to do was play one NRL game.
Right.
And I had a lot of people tell me I couldn't do it. I've never been the best at anything. I've never been the best. I know some people that know me might criticize me about that, but I worked really hard to get any result. I just really had I knew I somehow linked through that sort of adversity and failure thing. I linked, and I think this is a big thing too, passion and really having a purpose for something. That's what builds resilience as well. I keep getting these knockbacks, but I loved rugby league and I just wanted to play with the team, So long story short, I tried my heart. I signed with the Parramatta Eels when I was 17. I went down there. Country boy in Sydney, I just did not work. I remember ringing Dad up and mum and Dad just saying, this isn't for me. I went up to Mackay. And I remember it was one drunk night, actually. And this is
always is. It always is.
I'm sure some people can relate to this, but I had an epiphany. A policeman grabbed me. I was at a roundabout, and he said, "What are you doing, mate? What are you doing?" And I said, "Look, I just had an epiphany." I looked at him and said, "I don't know. I was only 18, 19 at the time. I'd come out the back end of the Parramatta Eels system, and I still wanted to play NRL. So I went home and penned a letter to Wayne Bennett, and I sent it registered post to play for Broncos reserve grade then. And somehow he got it. And Cyril Connell, who was a wonderful recruitment officer, he rang me up a couple of weeks later and said, "Wayne loved that letter, mate. You've got to come down for a trial." And I couldn't even remember what was in the letter. So yeah, I had a couple of great years at Toowoomba Clydesdales. We won the comp against the Dolphins in 2001. And I couldn't make it in first grade. I kept butting my head, and I'll never forget, the day I was meant to be going up, we'd won the comp, I got player of the year, and the day I was meant to be going up and negotiate a deal with Wayne Bennett, I just had a good friend of mine and a mentor that really supported me and helped me through tough times, because I wasn't getting paid a single cent at the Broncos. I actually got a job at the Broncos Leagues Club, and I used to do the bar shift from about 7 to 11 at night. And Wayne let me train full time, and because I knew I couldn't compete unless I trained full time. And so I'd train from 7 to 4, and then I'd go do a bar shift. And this is highly illegal. Don't try this at home. But I used to live off the cash donations from punters. They used to give me tips. I used to do the pokies, and there'd be dollars sitting in the hopper on the floor, and I used to pick them up and put them in my pocket. And some of the punters, again, highly illegal, some of the punters would have 2 credits left on the pokies, and I'd slap it, and I'd win, $10, $20. And I lived off that for 2 years. And my now beautiful wife was my partner at the time, and she knew how much I wanted to play NRL. And for me, so when I went to negotiate that deal, Paul Bunn, he saw me in the lift, and he said, "Mate, go somewhere else and play first grade. You should have played NRL years ago." And I said, "Thanks, mate." Shook his hand, and I don't know what it was, but I just had the tenacity to walk into Wayne and say, "Thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to be here next year." I got a shot with Norse in Brisbane, Nunda. Terry Madison was there. And before we get to that, Lou, I remember coming home and talking to my wife, because she thought I was going to sign a contract with the Broncos. I was 21 going on 22. Things were tough financially, and we were going through really bad times. And I told her I quit the Broncos. And Terry Madison, who everyone would know used to be a Broncos player, he started coaching reserve grade for Melbourne Storm. There's a punchline to this story, Lou. Anyway, I sat down with Katie, and I just told her I'm leaving. And I remember, we both started crying, and she's like, we're both like, how long is this going to go for? We'll put it all on the line. I used up all our savings to try and make it. And then I just said, we just both agreed, give it 12 months. This is it. This was my last season, and I'll walk away. And I'd walk away a happy man, because I knew I'd just given it everything. I didn't have, I get teared up and a bit emotional thinking about it now. And I went across the Norse, and I played 6 games with Norse. I got a shot with the NRL for Melbourne Storm, and never played a single game of reserve grade after that. I played first grade then for the next nearly 10 years. So, mate, talking about the darkest moments before the sun comes up in the morning, that was us. It was do or die for that year. And so, yeah, made the NRL. And, for me, that journey to play NRL, Lou, was so critical for, I guess, building the person and the character and the man I am today.
So in that quite fascinating story, there's one kind of consistency throughout all that is you backed yourself. You backed yourself, and you had Katie there too, to do that for you. But, that takes a lot of guts to.
Yeah, it does. It does, and again, there's so many opinions on this, and I don't want to, I'm not big on advice. This is my experience, and if people can pull stuff out of this and put that in their own life, that's unreal. But I never give up. Yeah, I just never give up, and I know there's always statistics around, small business. There's always statistics around, farming. There's always statistics around your probability of success in any endeavor that you choose to take, right? But I've been in the environments now, and I know that when you put it all on the line, and risk is a big thing. Again, everyone's got opinions about risk profile, especially academia and science. But, for me in my life, what's worked is the risk. My reward has always been a function of the risk that I put in. If I've risked a lot and I never give up. And I think the key thing there too, Lou, was there's always people involved. I was very lucky early on when I was young, because I think when you're young, you can tend to be pretty dumb. But I always had great people surrounding me, and I was always good with constructive feedback and focusing on what I needed to get done. The stress for me was always around, and I guess I later learned that through psychology and working with therapists, especially in the professional environment. But the stress was always around outcomes, focusing on outcomes and what I couldn't control. And, you know, I didn't think about this at the time, but I had great people that always focused me on the process. Kirk, you just keep doing this, do this at training, do this in the games, do this with your health, do this with and I just had that innate ability just to focus. Because I think for me, the reason why risk is so important in this equation, Lou, is that it's the risk that makes you focus. Because when you don't have the risk, for me, I lose focus. I'm all over the shop, when you've got to get something done, when it's all on the line, I'm crying with my wife on the bed and you're trying to make it work. Like, man, you have to make it work. It's do or die.
You have
right?
to.
So, yeah.
You have to do that. So when we had our own conversation, it was quite interesting because, professional sport, particularly football, can carry with it a stigma, I guess, of, what's it like? I guess, like you said, putting players out there at such a young age. Some of them do get paid a lot. Who's there for them? Are you just used as vehicles for team success and for more profit from their end? And I was very interested to know, and you can, but to tell us all, the training, I guess the psychology training that you were given then that you've actually carried through the rest of your life. If you can tell us about those flags.
Oh yeah, the flags. You want to talk about the flags, eh?
I want to talk about the flags.
I guess, yeah, like we did, I don't know if a lot of people would know this, but we actually do a lot of work with sports psychologists. Some people, and I guess it can be up to choice as well. Like, so I always chose to employ those practices and get that, that real scientific approach to mindset and behavioral psychology, because it's high performance, right? So I guess to start the story and to give it some context, Lou, like for me, I knew a big breakthrough for me, and it's part of resilience, right? Like the big breakthrough for me was really exploring my failure and my feelings and my personal attitudes towards failing. Like I would play the house down for 3 weeks. And then I'd start, if I'd made a mistake, and I could just not let it go. And then I'd just get caught in my head. And it was one thing that was actually stopping me from being a consistent NRL player.
Right.
I'd have 3 really good weeks, but then I'd have 3 really bad weeks. And so a real big fundamental shift, and I'm not going to go right into the specifics because I'm not a psychologist, but I know they got me to explore my relationship with failure, how much I was wrapping up my identity with failure. And just really focused on by exploring that and disconnecting, I guess, sort of detaching from that failure and even success, because success is the same. Everyone can wrap themselves up in success, and it's usually the same people that wrap themselves up in failure, right?
What goes up comes down eventually.
Yeah,
so
exactly
you're
right.
going to be
What goes up must come
roller
down.
coaster. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So the first massive lesson that I learned was a professional, and I don't think this is not just for athletes, but I learned from a psychologist what it was to have a professional mindset. And that is, like, anyone can do stuff when they're feeling good. And that's the easy bit. And the hard bit about NRL and any professional environment where week in, week out, you're playing in front of 30, 40,000 people and the pressure's on, the reality is the majority of that time you're going to feel shit. You're going to feel pretty bad, but you have to perform. And so, like, that was the first lesson, I guess, around the sports psychology of when you feel bad, how to just disconnect that, like your thoughts create emotions, create a behavioral response. So my first lesson was disconnecting that and it's not like you turn into a robot. It's just more like this, the ups and downs aren't so big. It's more like this. You're just a more centered, a really more balanced human being.
So how do you do that? How do you do that? Like, there was a technique or a meditation, or what was your way of being able to disconnect? So
the one thing for me to disconnect was through a sports psychologist taught me around mindfulness meditation. And I know some people can go, oh, it's candles and it's all this and all that. But the psychologists that we work with, we have to perform on the field. And when we recognize these feelings or thought patterns, we have to address them straight away. So we needed it's not so much meditation, it was a breathing technique. That's what we learned. So we learned, well, that's what I personally learned, was the breathing technique around when you recognize those feelings that come up, which are usually generated by real dark thoughts. You implement the breathing pattern, which can happen anywhere. You don't need candles, you don't need anything. It was the whole discipline around what I learned was around you can do it anywhere. You can do it performing in front of people, like for footy, you can do it walking down the street. It was an active meditation, and it just brought you back.
Can you do it now for us? Can you show us that technique? Show us the technique that you used?
All it is, I still use it today. It's just breathing in and out of your nose and making sure you take all your concentration and your mindfulness on the breath passing in and out of your nostrils. That's pretty technical, isn't it?
No, but nose breathing. Yeah. Do you do anything? Do you do like a 4 counts in, hold, let go, or it's just whatever?
Nah,
flow.
Don't do anything. I don't try to. Yeah, I just keep it nice and simple. And for me, like I think when you rip out when you really analyze the simplicity of that, it's really hard. So when your concentration and your mindfulness on your breath, that is just like, it's so hard. Everyone's got monkey mind. They're just like, it's hard to keep your focus straight there. And I think that when you do that, you'll figure out how much work you need to do. you need to do. But like, I don't want to say, like, I don't want to be prescriptive here, Lou. Like, I know that's what worked for me. And I guess the sports psychologist I worked with was brilliant in finding what works for individuals. Like I know some of the blokes I played with, they used to go for runs, or they'd go for rides on the bike or a swim, and that would achieve exactly the same, I guess, framework that everyone was trying to achieve.
So I guess it's first of all, sorry, keep going.
No, then I was just going to say the next step is in talking to the flags, I guess, that kind of was around team environment and like how the conversation I had with you, Lou, was around we had a psychologist who I told you I met in the street in Brisbane the other day, and I shook his hand and I gave him a cuddle and I said, mate, I still use those techniques right now. But we had flags. And again, it sounds really simple, what I've just said, but the thing that we learned in high performance is that simple things, everyone goes, when there's so much pressure and stress and anxiety, everyone goes back to basic instincts. You can't have a complicated environment when there's stress and anxiety involved. So all these things, there's like 3 things, or there's one thing to focus on all the time, so you can reset and you can get back to where you need to be, right? And for us, it was the flags. So we had to identify 3 things that we knew. For us, it was around playing rugby league, and if we knew we were having a bad game, we had to identify 3 observable characteristics that we did, behaviors that anyone could recognize in our team, and especially our coach, our number one accountability man, our coach. And we had to do that with our 3 flags for when we're having a great game. And so for me, I still remember it. For me, my flags were screaming off the line in defense really quickly and really making solid contact in defense. Number 2 was I was a talker. Can you believe that? I was a talker. I used to love that was my job in the team. I used to love bringing the team together. And number 3 was in attack. I used to hit the advantage line really well, get my nose through, and quick play the ball. So they're my 3 flags. And of course, my 3 good flags and the 3 bad flags were exactly the opposite of that. So I wasn't getting off the line of defense. I wasn't talking. I wasn't bringing people in. And I was hitting the ball too deep. I wasn't at the line trying to charge at the line and get into gaps. And what we learned was with each other, we had to recognize everyone's flag. So if I knew Robbie Kearns or Billy Slater wasn't playing, like immediately those flags went off in my head, I would grab him, and that whole community, and that's all the rugby league team is. It's just a wonderful community that are prepared to die for each other, literally, and we have to protect each other, and that's what we used to do. We used to just, come on, Billy, you've dropped 10 balls now, mate.
And what you've highlighted, I think, is pivotal to this discussion that can be relevant for everyone, for our children, for our farmers, for business people. And that's that it's not just highlighting the positive aspects of what's going on a particular day or an hour, but highlighting the not so great stuff too. And I can remember, and I know lots of people did this with their children when they were young around the dinner, what were the 3 best things of the day? But we would always have, well, and what were the 3 things that weren't so great? So that from a young age, people get used to talking about what was not so great, so that didn't seem like an element of shame. It didn't seem like they failed. It became, like you said right from the beginning, a normality as part of life. And I guess if we want to relate this back to our farmers, and you've had experience in this, it's having the self-awareness and the courage to identify your own flags. But then the next step is, who do I talk to about that? And for you, you had your team environment and you had your coach. And I guess it's, the message to everyone out there of, it's finding, I guess, your tribe or your people. And identifying that. So would you say that's quite accurate in terms of, our farming community too, or any person really?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that's just getting back to your point around failure. I think that when you can start pulling it apart and actually having a positive experience with failure, and realizing that, I was lucky when I was young. I had lots of great people that just wanted to help. And I think that what you find is, the more you ask for help, the more you realize so many great people want to help. Fast forward, I guess we're jumping around a bit, but the one thing that tech startup has taught me is when you, at the age of 43, you have the experience to look back and have a look at those inflection points in your life, Lou. And you realize that those points of failure were actually your greatest growth. It wasn't the good. It wasn't me making the NRL or playing X amount of games of NRL. It was the dark times that made, the good times, right? That got you to that level of growth that you needed to go to the next level. And that always involved people, because people, you only know what you know, right? And so great people who have been there before you, who are coaches, or, who have been through the tough times, exactly what you're going through. And I guess it goes back to focusing on the outcome versus the process. I just think that with people, you always focus on the process of the solution. How do we get through this together, right? How do we find a way, a light at the end of the tunnel? So that is paramount,
So Kurt, what would you say to, because you're someone that has knows this, but when we look at the stats, and I'm going to talk about men a little bit here, because it is quite common that men find it harder to reach out for help. When women are going through dark times, depression, or whatever it is, we generally speaking find it easier to reach out. And we know a statistic, which is just a terrible statistics, that the suicide rate for our farming community is 59% higher than for those people living in the city folk. The rate of suicide amongst teenage boys and men is higher than females. And, Beyond Blue and everything else, what that comes down to is not reaching out. So how do, there might be a farmer listening now who's, been through hell and back, disaster after disaster, and they've got that innate toughness of, I can do this on my own and I don't know how to reach out. How do they do that? How do they first pick up the phone to Drought Angels and go, I need that help? What can we do as a community with Drought Angels to make them go, you know what, mate, that's okay?
Lou, I wish I had the magic bullet, mate, because I've experienced in my life personally as well, suicide and suicide attempt, and it's just phenomenal. The statistics, make me cry. It's just unreal. As far as the farmer who can't reach out, I put it back on his mates, and I think that, and the thing is that, after experiencing it with my family, you got to relate to people, and like I think I like the movement around creating awareness around talking to your mates about, for example, and if anyone from the Wandawan area is watching, I actually gave up alcohol for 12 months, and I went out there. We do a big rugby league carnival every year out there to raise funds for the junior rugby league. But I remember, I will never forget how many people come up and were speaking to me and asking me, how do I just get off the alcohol for a bit? I want to do what you're doing. What are you doing? I said, mate, don't put it in your mouth. Like, and I think that's the first step.
Just do it.
Just do it. And like, you know what? And I guess I'm not trying to sidestep around the farmer who's been through adversity and who won't reach out for help. I'm trying to challenge his mates. You know, like that's where it starts. You know, his mates are the only people he will listen to. And I think that's why Drought Angels have a special place in the community, because they're good mates with a lot of people, you know, and a lot of farmers relate to how they approach it, you know, the team at Drought Angels. And I think that's it, mate. I need to put it on his mates, and they need to talk to him and feel comfortable around when they recognize stuff's not going well. You need to say, and it's not, you know, hard conversations are hard and they never get easy, but you know, like there's nothing better than having a beer and just saying, you're right, mate, what's going on? Like, and always being there, because I think, you know, and even, you know, in light of Paul Green, you know, with the NRL, you just never know, just to let people know that you're there and that they can ring anytime. Like that's a big one, right? Because, you know, like I feel like you just never know when that's going to happen. And if you're there for them to reach out and just provide, you know, a voice and help them. You know, there might be little things you can do, you know, like, so yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, mate, but I think.
Well, I think there's a couple of practical things, and I think you're right. In the last few years, you know, the stigma is starting to fall away a little bit around, you know, you're actually not being tough, keeping it to yourself. You know, and it's reaching out. And I remember being out in Chinchilla with Tash and the team last year, actually, and meeting the wonderful farmer Dan, and the conversation where he said it was getting to Christmas time, and, you know, first year ever didn't have presents for his kids, and he was freaking out, and he'd heard about Drought Angels, and, you know, had the number by the phone, and so many times he'd picked up the phone, put it down, picked up the phone, put it down, and just that one day he went, stuff it, I'm going to do it, and it changed his life. And now they have this on. Because of that, he's been able to help his mates as well. And I think perhaps a practical thing is there is a psychologist, her name at the moment, and she has the 5-4-3-2-1 rule. And it's this method where, you know, you've got to do something. You know, you've got to make that call. You know, you've got to call your mate. You know, everything else. But like you said at the beginning, you have that self-sabotage stuff that goes off in your head. But if you just say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and whether it's your hand dialing, your feet walking to the person, or your mouth speaking, you just do it. And I think, you know, that's the key so many people can use for that. So you finished football. And if you're watching online now, we'd love to have your questions. Just put them wherever you're watching, type them, and I can see them in the feed. And, you know, Kirk's an open book. You can ask him anything you like.
I love Q&A.
Yeah, he loves Q&As. So, you know, you've gone from your footy career, and then you've gone into the world of family. You've got 3 beautiful children. Who, you know, let's bring a photo up. This is you. I think that
depends on which night you're talking about, Lou. Beautiful.
We'll pull it up in a sec. It's you with the 3 of them around your campfire. There we go. Isn't that gorgeous?
Don't get too close to the fire. You'll burn your eyes, mate. You'll burn your eyes.
But in the last few years, you know, you've gone from a successful footy career to a father. And I guess you put things that you've learned in place every single day to be, you know, a great role model for your children, to be a great wife for Katie. And then you started your own tech startup, Eggy.
Yeah.
In amongst all of this, tell us about that, and because I've read a bit of your background story and the coping mechanisms. I know I found a business it's tough, but doing it with 3 little kids, how did you do that, and what possessed you to do that?
How silly are we, right, Lou? How silly. I mean, yeah, well, I guess Eggy was kind of a byproduct of the pain and that we were going through every day having kids. Mate, I don't know about anyone else, but life admin for us was torture. Like, we had crap everywhere, multiple cloud drives, bills and emails. We had, the fridge covered in stuff, the third drawer. And when the kids come along, it just, they multiplied, right? So Eggy kind of is a solution that we put together based off the pain we experienced as that we're going through every day as parents. So I guess to answer your question around, mate, professional sports and doing it tough on the farm is nothing compared to raising 3 young kids, no sleep, and then, building a tech company. And I know my whole life up to this point, and even Katie, it's just been to get ready for this moment, because all those things are quite okay when you're getting, sleep's not too bad, but then there's some nights we don't get an hour's sleep. Sometimes I've worked through, and I don't recommend this for anyone, but I've gone 2 nights in a row with no sleep, just worked right through because kids are up, you're just starting to get in the habit, your sleep's broken. So but I tell you what, everything that we spoke about with failure, and just going back to your point, not to backtrack too much, but the farmer that's holding it all in and doesn't want to talk to anyone or nothing, I think that was one of the things I experienced as a bloke. Like, you probably can tend to be more, I've got this, it's you versus the world. And like, you can become a little bit of perfectionist attitude. And I guess I probably still had a little bit of that in me, even though I was much better at doing it, because reflecting on my failure because of my professional rugby league environment. But being a father and then building this tech company and understanding the whole project management side of how technology gets released in the market, and you actually have it's called an iterative process, where you bring in all the data and all the information and all the feedback from users, and then you keep like evolving this product. And it's kind of like, when you look at it, it's just like life. Like, you learn from the failures you have in technology, and then you make it better, and it just gets better and better. And with the kids, like, I really had to sit down. I went from training and being fit as a fiddle just to not even have the energy to go do training. Like, and training was such an important part of my life. So how do you deal with that? When training's not working for me, I'm not sleeping, and everything's like not about you anymore. Like, it's all about the kids and making sure the kids are alive, and then making sure the team at Eggy and everything here. Like, I look after all the financial ops and funding operations, just making sure that survives. So I guess to your point, mate, I had to really, really go inwards and did a lot of soul searching. And that whole, that farmer that thinks he can do it by himself, I learned a massive lesson when we had our first 2 children. And when we start, like, just in the early days with Eggy, I learned a massive lesson in not getting help, is that you get caught in your own mind. And we have this motto in Eggy now, it's called, we're better together. Because like, you have these ideas around what you think is right or what you think is going to work. But what we've learned is that, especially through this whole iterative process with technology, is it's actually better to bring in stakeholders. And that's where the magic is. Like, and the best thing about that is, that's where the magic is, mate.
And it's really interesting. Hello, Tom. We've got Tom Harricks on, who has just asked a question about what advice can you give in regards to well-being, and what resources have you been able to access that has helped you, which I think you've just, without even knowing the question, I've kind of answered that a little bit. Can you expand on that a bit? I mean, you've got 3 kids, you're not sleeping, you're building a tech. How are you looking after yourself?
So, like, for me here, I think there's 2 camps here, right? There's the whole living in balance, and then there's the whole doing what's important. And like, I've seen, and again, everyone's got an opinion on this, right? And I feel like, I actually do a lot of work with people in regards to, mentoring as far as tech companies and actually, health and fitness as well. And I see a lot of people trying to achieve balance in their life, but they're still stressed out and they're not achieving the results they want. And from my experience, and even with myself, it's all around focusing on what's important. I think at any stage of the game, like, balance for me is about focusing on what's important. The reality of my life is that we've got a tech startup that's going gangbusters. We've got 3 young children. We have zero time for anything. So every day I wake up, I just keep going back to what's so important. And what makes that easy for me is really focusing, making sure my health and fitness is good, and trying to get, and I know this is really hard sometimes, but that includes sleep, trying to make sure that I do, I know it's a cliche, but focus on yourself, make sure, and this is different for everyone. You've got 3 key things that, that make you who you are and makes you feel good about yourself, and that you're self-actualizing, right? It's either your fitness, you might like to read books, or you might like to go for a walk down the paddock. And just being ruthless. Your job is to be ruthless on those priorities. Nothing gets in the way of trying to achieve that. As far as resources, sorry, Lou.
I love that, because I think, now we live in a world where we have so much choice. And I don't think choice. We're blessed to have choice because of freedom, but at the same time, having so much choice can be an overload of the senses. And my goodness, our kids are going through now, with screens and everything else. But choice, I love that philosophy of just focusing on the 3 things that are important to you, not your best friends, not what your parents think. I think that if that's something that can be instilled in people at a young age, that's something they can carry through, because that's going to change. As you said, when you were playing footy, your number one thing every single day. It can't be now. And I think sometimes we beat ourselves up and we self-sabotage because we're not doing what we used to do, because life's changed. So I absolutely love that. The 3 things of the focus, and knowing that that's going to evolve.
There's so much noise, Lou. And if I had one tip like that, with the people, our team, our Eki team, and even people who have come to work with me in the past, is that, and you hit the nail on the head, you're the one that defines what's important. And I think that's where people get lost. There's so much noise. They've got their parents, they've got their schools, the people are defining what's important for them. And that's where the stress comes from, right? That's where the anxiety comes from. So that is As
I love that. I think we just nailed something there. I think that's,
I don't know. I didn't nail anything, mate. Again, it's probably just helping you focus more, mate, because it's so noisy.
Absolutely.
The world is so noisy right now. Like the hardest thing that you just said, the hardest thing for us in a tech startup today, Lou, our biggest challenge is knowing what to work on each day. What's priority number 1? What's priority number 2? And what's priority number 3? That is our biggest challenge. And I feel like that's my biggest challenge in life as from a personal level. What is the most important thing for me right now? Number 1, number 2, and number 3, because it's just such a noisy world. It's such a noisy world. And I guess to your point around that too, Lou, where, when you're talking about all this noise, I think, and was it Tammy, the question? She asked about resources. And man, if I can give anyone a tip today, is this.
Okay.
Use resources, use people. Don't use online. This is where people are getting so confused around what's important to them. Because when you figure out what's important to you, and even as a quick filter on that, find people that align with that, or, you've got good friends, you've got good people, reach out to people. We've built our company. We have built our company from the ground up on LinkedIn. And you know what? Right. I have contacted everyone. So if we needed to, for example, we needed to build, I needed to learn how to build technical infrastructure for a consumer app that has a business-facing side.
You just didn't know how to do that?
I didn't know how to do that, right? I know. I was a front rower. I know we think front rowers can do a lot of things. But that was one thing I couldn't do. But what I did was I found everyone on LinkedIn and I reached out for help. And I said, listen, this is our story. Tell your story. This is my story. This is what I need help with. And I'm telling you, everyone. Not one person didn't hit me back. Everyone will hit you back. So, like, as far as resources are concerned, like, think about people. Like, people who have, if you're going through some tough financial times, try and find people that have been through tough financial times and have made it out the other end. Sit down with them and talk to them. Be ruthless on that. Don't talk to advisors who give financial advice that have never been in your shoes before. If you're trying to get fit and healthy and you used to be not a weight that you were happy with, find someone that has whatever done. Find someone that's done what you've done. You know what I mean? Be ruthless on who you talk to around resources. That's another one, because they will help keep you focused.
And I think that's so true too. And it comes back to what about retaining that focus on what's important. And it's finding your tribe. And Brene Brown always talks about speaking to the people who have been in the arena. With social media, get rid of the crap that people who are sitting there typing away, who have never gone out of their comfort zone, or they've never experienced what you have. It's going to your tribe, the people who get it, who have done that, who have been there and have got up and stepped up there. And those are the people to go to.
You're exactly right, Lou. And the biggest example. You're right. The biggest example that I can see smashing me in the face right now is Drought Angels. Drought Angels work every single day with people who are struggling on the land, on the farm, rural communities, drought, flood, you name it. Like, mate, I'm tingling over this because I've got friends who have been affected by this, by the direct intervention from Drought Angels. They deal with this every single day. Like, if you need to put in place the steps to get out of your hole, you ring Drought Angels right now. Get on the line and ring them. Absolutely. They deal with this every single day.
Absolutely. And it's they're absolutely incredible. And I've never met a person that once they've made that phone call and once they've done that has gone, oh, that wasn't useful. Like every person I've spoken to about Drought Angels is like you. They're an advocate. They're like, it changed my life. Oh, it saved my life in so many situations. And, they're just amazing. We love you, Tash and team. Just absolutely amazing.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Just another example there too, Lou. Like, one thing that I learned, I know that when we came into the technology game, I've studied economics and I went back and did all the finance and I read all the books and I read all the theory. I've spent 10,000 hours studying the theory. And like, one thing that stands out for me above all is that, like, if I had to write a brief summary on all the theory on what they said, what it takes to build a multi-billion-dollar tech company all over the world, and if I wrote that summary, and then I actually spoke to a founder who started the company from the ground up, who built and scaled all around the world. If I wrote a summary of what they would say, I laugh every single day when I talk to founders who have been where I want to be, or where we want to be with Team Eggy. I laugh every single day when I talk to them, and I hear their advice to me, and I laugh about the advice I get from, it can be investors that have never been there. It can be advisors and contractors who have never been there. It can be the internet who people are just posting clickbait. Like, the advice and the experience is that far apart. It's ridiculous. Like, that's why you need to be ruthless with who you talk to, because, I'm very passionate about that, as you can tell, Lou.
No, I love it, and I think there's some amazing tools that are coming out of this. I'm very inspired as well. I think it helps reset your own, your daily practices and your framework and what you're going through. I think there's some, and what I love is simple. It's simple. It's focus on those your flags, your 3 good flags, your 3 not so great flags. Come back to them. Reach out to people, but be selective who you're reaching out to. Reach out to the people that have been the arena, who've been in the same shoes as you. But at the same time, just, Nike were onto something. Just do it. Just do it. Just make that call, because what's the worst that can happen? And I think sometimes we let that self-sabotage come in of, oh, what if they think, well, who cares? Who cares? What are they going to ignore you? Or are they going to say no? Whatever. Move on to the next person.
And I think, when they say no, you go like next and just go to the next person. But I think what you just said there, what's the worst that could happen? And this is, I think this is the conversation that needs to happen around failure. The worst that can happen in that situation, Lou, is that you learn a lesson off someone that pushes you forward on your evolution around your ability to deal with adversity and your ability to deal with failure. You learn a lesson, right? Yeah. That's the worst that can happen. For me, when I think about that, I go, well, man, I just want to fail more. Like my objective is to fail as many times as I can in 12 months. Honestly, I want to fail. Because that's where I learned. Sorry, mate.
And that's the true life. That's living an authentic life where you're being true to yourself. So you know that you've given it, like you said, right from the beginning when you weren't getting paid at the Broncos, and you made that decision. It's giving it your all and being true to your own self. And if you've lived a life that's true to yourself with all the ups and downs, then at least you're feeling that realness and that good inside. Now, Kurt, we've got 3 minutes. That went so fast.
Come on, I thought we were going for 2 hours, Lou. I thought we were going to have a 2-hour podcast here.
People have to go and eat and work today. We could chat, but I just want to say a shout out to Drought Angels too. And I really want to point out too that despite the name being Drought Angels, that team are there through all disasters. And, in the last 7 years, fire, flood, mice plague, pandemic, flood, reoccurring. And very interesting fact that I wasn't aware of is that for each natural disaster, it takes about 7 years for one big disaster for that farm or that farmer to get through that. So the journey that the Angels team go on is 7 years after each disaster. So you imagine the longevity of that relationship and that shelf life. They don't get government support. So anyone watching now, help them out. They really are incredible. They change the lives of so many people, and we can all do our bit, but it's not just all about that today. It's about awareness. It's about opening up and talking to each other and reaching out. And Kurt, you've been absolutely amazing. Is there any final thing you want to share? It can be about your kids, your wife, anything at all that you want to share before we close today?
I just want to say thanks for having me, Drought Angels. Lou, it's been unreal chatting. It's been a really good conversation. Love these conversations. Reach out. Drought Angels are the experts of dealing with this. I think the anxiety and the stress I always see comes from focusing on the outcome and on things you can't control. Focus on the process. Drought Angels will help you with that and get in there. And if anyone feels like for whatever reason there's a barrier to Drought Angels and they feel like they can talk to me before, I'm always available. So hit me, find me on social. Kirk Wilson, LinkedIn, wherever. What's that, Lou?
Kurt's available at 3 a.m. in the morning when he's not sleeping.
I'm available.
He's always
anytime.
available.
Just hit me up. Find me on socials. Find me. You'll find me. And if you need to chat, reach out and have a chat. And I will, mate, I'm here. I've got an ear. And then we'll talk to Drought Angels then. If you feel like that's a good approach or whatever works for you, I'm here.
You're a good man, Kurt Reynoldsson, and I know we really appreciate you having here for being the first of our speakers on this 3-part series. We hope you've enjoyed it. You can reach out to the Drought Angels team. We will have the recording for this ready in the next day or so that we can share that around the greater community. We'll be back next Wednesday at the same time with Karen Smith, who's a very different speaker with some amazing facets. She's actually a Bali bombing survivor. So again, when we're talking about people that have been through all sorts of atrocities in their life, She's quite an incredible people. So, and just on a final tip, we've got Karen Weller here who goes, thank you, Kirk, for being so open and inspiration to all of our listeners. And thanks, Drowned Angels, for hitting the mark again. So on that beautiful note from Karen Weller, we're going to leave you today. Go and have a beautiful day. Focus on your 3 things and reach out if you need help. And we'll see you next week. Okay. Signing off.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.